Hello everyone. This is the fifth episode of the Founders Interviews by S4S. S4S, as you might know, is the student pillar for of learning and community and innovation. What we aim to do at S4S is to foster students' initiatives and help them realize their projects and their ideas, both existing and not in existing initiatives. So, for example, one of the student associations we do support is Erasmus Tech Community. And today I'm joined here by the co-founder Raj of Erasmus Tech Community. So thank you very much for being here, Raj. And please tell us a little bit about yourself and your story, let's say.
It's a pleasure being here. So thank you very much for inviting me. So what's my story? Well, you heard my name. My full name is Rajarshi Chakraborty. It's a bit more difficult to pronounce, so that's why most people know me as Raj on and around the campus. Basically, if you were to summarize who I am as a person, I think I'm a very curious person. That's something which everyone points out. And that has to do probably with the fact that, I've lived around in different countries, moved around a lot, have interest in many different things. So my academic background, I did my master's at RSM, which is when I founded the Erasmus Tech Community. I did a master's in business information management. Before that, I was actually in Moscow for some time and for exchange. And before that, I was in Maastricht. So I did my bachelor there, more or less in the business, but with a specialization on emerging markets and developmental economics. And the reason why I was interested in that space is because I grew up in emerging markets. Originally I'm from India, so my parents are both from India, but I was born and raised in Ukraine. So that's why I speak Russian and Ukrainian fluently. And I spent some time in Middle East in Dubai before. So having lived around in different countries, you have this natural curiosity for people, for change, and somehow it turned into curiosity for digital, and that's how we ended up, let's say, starting the organization, the Erasmus Tech Community. But I think I'll tell you more about that. And but that was I founded that with some of my friends during my master's, but that has already been a couple of years. Since then, I have not really left the university. I just have kind of changed my caps, from one to the other, and have been full-time employed by the university to support. Initially, I was supporting the CIO, so the Chief Information Officer of the university, with kind of the digital agenda, the digital innovation side of things, and being the student voice, more or less, or the young voice in the field to help with explaining where is education going and how as a university we should work on our infrastructure to enable better services for the students. And now already 6 months ago, I switched to a new team called the Erasmus Center for Data Analytics. To some of you, you may have heard about it, but precisely what we're trying to do is bring together all, let's say, our expertise on data analytics, machine learning, and AI as a university, all 10 faculties, starting from RSM to the medical faculty, and to facilitate more of applied research and education. That is basically our ambition. And within that, my role is actually to be leading the business development with the technology companies. So bringing on board companies like Tableau, like Celonis, like Alteryx, DataRobot, you name it, the big cloud providers like Google's and so forth, to bring them to campus so that we can enable more applied education and research that would actually help our students and the research community. So that is basically in a nutshell what I do. In addition, I run my podcast with a friend of mine. It's called Speed, Change, Repeat, if you're curious, where we interview leaders in artificial intelligence. So, and overall, a few other things here and there, but that, I guess, is who I am.
Mm-hmm. And so today you're here because of your role as the co-founder of Erasmus Tech Community. So I was curious about how did it come about? How did you get the idea to start it? And what was the mission in mind when you were starting it?
Well, that's a very good question. And to be honest, when people ask, you always think that what was that altruistic mission when you started? I mean, but it starts with a problem. The problem that I saw first and foremost was ignorance. ignorance among our own generation towards the technologies, primarily the exponential technologies, which are impacting the way we live and interact. And simply, go to any average person in our university, still the level of awareness about technology is still very poor. And that is something which has always been concerning to me, from, let's say, my bachelor's to moving even to like a course like business information management. Yes, people were aware, but they didn't know where in this technology value chain they could position themselves. So that is something which I was observing for a while. Um, Now, the personal reason also to start something was, honestly, I wanted to create a community where I could learn more about these technologies.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So over the summer of 2017, I was reading different books. At that time, blockchain was really kind of hyped up, and over the introductory weekend, so BIM has this introduction weekend, and you go to this random place and basically to get drunk, and I was just, that's where I really met my co-founders later on, who was just sharing this ideas as like, it would be really cool if we had this community where we could talk about different, technologies, gather some people, ideas, and see what we can do with that. And Jonathan, who is my co-founder, who took that up very seriously, was like, yeah, why don't we do it? And so, that thought kind of sobered us up during that weekend. We came back the next day. We were like still hungover. We were sitting at Polak, and we were like, we got to do it. And we started. And how do you start? You start by literally making a Facebook page and say, now we are official. That is it. We didn't ask for permission for nobody. And then we went on with our first event, and then kind of the rest is history. But the mission was, and that's what our tagline, right? It started with understand tomorrow, right? Not to delay your understanding till tomorrow, but more like what is coming tomorrow and understand it today. And if you follow kind of our activities, and now we have kind of tweaked our motto to understand and create tomorrow. Because the idea is that don't only you should, understand, learn about what's happening, but also have an active involvement in shaping tomorrow, rather than being a bystander. Don't be a visitor on a football pitch, put the boots on and, start running.
Yeah.
And yet I realize as a university, we have not yet been training people enough in tech skills, especially, but more and more the world is going towards, everything being technology driven. And if we don't actively participate, we are sidelining ourselves. So there's a huge need for basically what we do. And that's what I'm proud of us as an organization.
And so you're now the second person I'm interviewing who started a tech association on campus. The first one is Maksud, who founded or who co-founded the Turing Students During Society. And so I'm curious about, I think I have a bit of an idea, but a lot of people may not have an idea, is what are the main differences between Turing students and Erasmus Tech community?
Right. So when we started, of course, we did come across Turing as an organization which was there on campus, but very simply, we saw that there was a gap. There's a gap when it specifically came to awareness events. Let's say what Turing does is great, and I think they should be doing that with, full attention, and, more the merrier. Like there is a huge requirement and demand for coding courses, for actual hard skills. And it would be great, if they focus their chat and channel their attention there. What we saw, there is a gap in kind of the pre-stage to that is the why part. You only commit yourself to really creating or sitting down for boot camps when you know why you want to do it. But many of the students, they didn't know why they need this or where to apply their knowledge. And that is where we started doing, different events where we started doing like tech deep dives, where we'd be like, hey, this is blockchain, or hey, this is artificial intelligence. Come and learn, what is it? Once you've gotten that awareness, maybe you're actually interested to invest your time into developing your skills. So most of our initial events, actually in our first year, then we have pivoted a bit as well, and we're doing other things now, but where to kind of kindle that curiosity among the people, and to say that, don't be scared. Just because you're studying law doesn't mean that you're not shouldn't be learning about technology, or you're studying audit. In fact, you should be, because these technologies are coming after you.
Yeah.
So then we did this events. The format was kind of the future series. We'd take an industry, future of logistics, future of food delivery, future of medicine, and bring in speakers from different places, just to kindle that curiosity, and so that people ask the right questions.
Hmm.
Those events were not something where people come out as experts. All I would feel good if people walked out with more questions to ask.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that is something which definitely lacked on campus. And honestly, if somebody comes up with more tech events, I don't see that as competition. I see that good. This is good for the community as a whole. We need more.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, how do you by today, or like let's say now, how would you measure, or do you believe that ETC has been successful in achieving its goals? And what do you think is like the biggest achievement of ETC till this day?
Look, there are different ways to measure success. There is the classic KPIs that we, of course, measure to look at the awareness that we have created, the following, and I think in many ways we have done great as an organization, right? So we have quite a significant social following on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. We have engagement. Most of our events, actually first year, were always sold out. I mean, we would always, and in fact it was especially the first events, we had so much fun, because we would just the first event we had to do twice, because we sold out the lecture hall in legit like 24 hours. We're like, oh my god, what are we doing? This is great. Then we had the big event with Google and the aula. So we have done a lot of great stuff that I'm very proud of.
Mm.
And in terms of the numbers and the sheer number of people that we have reached with our events and the name that we have gathered, that is great. But what I generally look at is the bit more intangible things, the things which are harder for us to sometimes grasp. But whenever we hear these personal anecdotes of growth, that is when I feel most fulfilled. When
Mm.
people come to me and say, you know what, like I went to this event and then I thought that I should pivot to this, or do this, or should learn this, or should start a course here. Or people like, thanks to your event, I actually met a co-founder for my next startup, or I got an interesting assignment. Like we have had personal letters kind of sent that I got into Microsoft because of the event and the opportunity to speak to the CTO right in person.
Mhm.
Those are the things which I find most heartwarming. And in addition to that is, let's say, our teams, the teams that for already well, we had our board second. This is already our fourth board. And what I always ask people is that I don't care, how much effort you put in. Just tell me if you're proud of what you do,
Mm.
right? And so I'm always curious about the personal development of every single board member or a person that is associated or is in our committees. And um, I'm curious to see how being involved with us has turned you into a kind of better human, or a more skilled human, basically, right?
Yeah.
And those are the stories that I'm proud of, right? When people come back and said that was a valuable experience because I see, the problems from a different perspective now, or something along those lines. So it's a
Mm.
bit more altruistic, but those are things that I try to measure more, rather than just the pure numbers, which of course we as an organization have to look at
Mm.
to measure our growth.
Mhm. And this kind of goes back to what you were saying at the very beginning, to the initial idea, or like the initial frustration uh, that started this organization, was the frustration of people's lack of awareness, or lack of any kind of knowledge on this topic. So this brings me to my next question, which is, does the lack of knowledge people have about concepts such as AI, IoT, which is Internet of Things, deepfakes, scare you? Is that something that concerns you, that so many people, even in our generation, which is like the tech generation, which grew up on technology, just doesn't know anything about this, or doesn't know what dangers they pose?
Right. Um, it's a very good question, and I think yes, it does scare me from different perspectives. Like and I've had these conversations with different people, starting from my grandfather and grandmother to see their perspective on technology, to people of my age and younger. And again, that ignorance sometimes is scary because we don't have the choice anymore to turn ourselves out of the technology bubble. There's no one thing that's like, you know what, this is not going to touch me. That's not possible anymore. We are what I would call kind of cyborgs already, right? In the sense that we do augment ourselves with additional tools like basically our phones and all. Like, simply, if you have to go to go somewhere, like I can't get there without Google Maps anymore. Like, I don't know the city of Rotterdam anymore because since I've moved here, anywhere that I had to go, I would use my phone. Now, what impact does it have on ourselves as human beings, our neuroplasticity? That's from a user perspective, but overall, it is quite scary because, simply put, if our society is not educated on something, it cannot take the best decisions for ourselves as a society, right? And that's why tech education is extremely important. As much as we measure kind of IQ, now a lot of talk about EQ, which is, I think, even more important than IQ. I think there should be the third quotient, which is DQ, the digital quotient, the digital intelligence, where one has to understand their place in this digital value chain, as a consumer, but also as a producer of data. And, what do you leave behind? What do you consume? What is responsible consumption when it comes to digital media? What are the risks associated with it? That's when you talk about deep fakes. Deep fakes can start wars. Deep fakes can do a lot of harm on an individual or a country level. And the fact that a lot of people are not aware of the possibility that things like this exist is dangerous, because then you can create these armies of people that are just, told one thing and they believe it, because what does our common wisdom say? What you see is what you believe. So that's why actually on our Erasmus Tech Summit, which I definitely would like, it was one of our best, our biggest event actually 2 years ago. Our slogan, or kind of the thing that we used to wear on our hoodies, is technology there to empower or enslave? Actually, well, let me see. I have my hoodie right in front. I want to show it to you. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something which, as much as we promote technology generally, that technology is great, it's there to empower, we have to remember about the risks. Yeah. And they're having the right values is extremely important to guide ourselves in that field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess I would have to agree that this is very, very concerning in general. But
just one quick point on this, so we had the speaker on the same summit, right? James Whitaker. His talk is actually on our YouTube channel, and James said one thing. He said, "Don't leave the world to the nerds to fuck up any further."
Yeah.
And that's something which stuck with me, because a lot of the technology people, they're great at what they do, they love their product, but not necessarily have the ability to fully recognize the impact that they bring. People like Mark Zuckerberg, or of course he gets a lot of heat these days for Facebook, but there's so many products which maybe initially were created with even potentially the right intentions, but they could not comprehend the actual effect it would have on the people.
Yeah.
And that's where actually, as social science students, we have an important role to play to kind of balance that out, to work together with technology people to produce products which are of net gain to the population, not of net loss.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so, talking about Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and Google and all these big companies and the increasing role they play, such as the fact that most of news probably in our generation is now consumed through social media and such. Do you believe that these big tech titans are becoming too powerful to handle, either by state or the civil society, or in general just kind of omnipotent?
Well, my answer to that is it is the Wild West still in the world of tech. You grab what you can, and the ones who have been smart and had a kind of a early start, yes, they have been able to monetize, and that is the reason why if you look at stock markets, look at the technology companies and how they are very like their PE ratios and all that. I mean, they're much more highly valued than any other companies of similar size.
Mm.
So as society right now, or as investors, we are giving a lot and a lot of money and attention to these tech companies, which is blowing up their valuations, which allows them to further, fulfill their growth. Now, the real question is that right or wrong? If you look at it from a perspective that, oh, companies like Google or Apple, look at Apple. I mean, was it almost $2 trillion valuation, and it's growing. So Google, these companies are bigger than many countries in terms of their kind of GDP if you were to compare.
Yeah.
The real question is it right or wrong? If you say that should companies have that much of power, or should that power go to the governments? But are governments better at managing power? There's all this debates that rise.
Mm.
I would say that, well, where we are right now has been a very natural process. Should we go and clamp down on these companies to break them apart or not? I don't know if I can give you like, it's a very tricky question, because on one hand, yes, we should, but on the other hand, like every time you create this vacuum of power, somebody will take it.
Mm.
If it's not company A, it's going to be company B. If it's not company B, it's going to be government C. And who should be governing us as a world? It's very tricky to judge. So I don't think the answer just lies in breaking them up or instilling more competition, because over time, the power dynamics will put new winners on the table anyways.
Right. But there still could be some laws or measures to prevent things such as like Cambridge Analytica, or like companies like Amazon virtually not paying any taxes in the US, or Apple not paying, and Facebook and Google not paying any taxes in Europe.
Right. But well, that has, of course, I do agree that let's say more regulation is required, but that has to do with, of course, more education of the policymakers and overall us as a society. Um, and that is not natural. Like look at any field. After the gold rush in the US, kind of they had to bring in the rule, let's say, create new rules. Otherwise, people are shooting each other all the time, right? So there was you see a very natural kind of transition to having more rules, right? And Europe is kind of leading the way in that by enforcing things like the GDPR and having other privacy laws, and trying to have the anti-monopoly rules coming out of here. But it can come at a very high cost to Europe. If Europe is the one that says, okay, we are like halting the brakes, but then US and China moves on, then there's nobody gonna come and like pick us back up in a way.
Yeah.
So what is lacking right now is a global approach, but that's going to be very difficult, especially in a time where China and US are in this a new digital warfare, or kind of the Cold War of today, where they're competing, and Europe is like, what, we are kind of the right people here. We are there to referee the game, but in reality, just lagging behind in a way.
All right, fair enough. And but still, talking about the big companies and the way the market is now assembled, is the closest thing to describing the situation an oligopoly, or is it not?
Ironically, it is. I mean, if you just look at the larger market and you look at, what are the companies that we hear most about, maybe not even like the market share, but the mind share. Literally nobody talks beyond the kind of the Googles, Amazons, Facebooks, and Apple. Like these are four companies, and then there's the Chinese ones like Huawei, that are coming up, or not coming up. They're already huge, but they still don't get that much of what do you call the mind share. Or so in reality, I would definitely say that it's skewed towards few of these large companies.
Mm.
I said ironically is this is like the time where it's the easiest to start a company.
Mm.
Like in terms of you have the best access global network. If you want to find customers, you can do that sitting in one country, find them in another. You have ample access to people through tools like LinkedIn. We're globally connected. We have access to knowledge. Like before, if you wanted to specialize in something, we had books, libraries, and the amount of time it would take to become, let's say, an expert or learn something has been minimized so much simply by having Google as a tool where you can literally have a precise search and learn from that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about what one needs to start a company, it's never been easier.
Mm.
What I do see as a challenge is how do you compete, especially when it comes to data. Like uh, starting something is easy, but scaling something can be a bit difficult in markets where there is a very dominant player. That's why for the last 10, 15 years, we don't see a second Google, right? Because Google is just so good at search and they're getting better and better. Unless there is a fundamentally new, let's say, technology rift and an invention, simply on innovation, I don't think any company can, displace Google as a primary search engine.
Mm.
And same goes with Amazon and like few other companies. Unless they do something really stupid, I wonder, let's say, how somebody else could take a significant chunk of the market.
Mm.
So that is something which I do see. But also from history, what we observe is that no one stays on top forever. Like the Roman Empire at some point had to fall as well, and that's how also organizations like Kodak and of course Blockbuster, like which many thought that were too big to fail,
Yeah.
because they just got comfortable with where they are.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it may seem that right now this is it and these are the parties that will always be there, and there's many reasons, as I said, they're the data monopolists and they keep growing and learning from it. But history shows that at some point, they will fall simply because of their own comfort level.
Mm-hmm. And you already mentioned the tensions and let's say the Cold War or the unfolding Cold War between U.S. and China. I was wondering what's your opinion on the as China is now called the rising tech superpower. What is your opinion on China's level of tech superiority, and if you believe that it's going to overcome the US, and whether that would be a good thing for the world or not?
It's such a difficult question because like, and I don't think I can take any side, right? So what I do recognize is indeed China has come from this player that was known to be, the outsourcing partner and the low value added products. And all of a sudden, over time, they have turned into this massive, behemoth of a nation which has their hands and ears everywhere and they're doing everything, which is scary, for the old world, which is like, oh my God, who is this new kid on the block and that is challenging the throne? And US being on the throne at this point in time is the one that is, has its knees shivering in a way, right?
Mm.
It's like, so I think it's natural what we see again, that, the position of US is challenged. There was a Cold War, well, with Soviet Union kind of broke apart. And in a way, US got the best of it because after the fall of Soviet Union, a lot of best minds ended up going to US.
Mm.
And US capitalized on that very well. With China, is it still a rising star, or has it already like risen? It's a difficult thing to say or judge because I mean, when I was last year at the Web Summit in Lisbon, what I found interesting is that the opening speech was not actually done by any American company. It was done by the chairman of Huawei,
Mm.
and then was kind of the president, I believe, of AT&T. But the fact that it was not the other way around, but Huawei first, I think sent a strong message. And this being from the top, let's say, tech conference in the world.
Mm.
Is it good for the world or not? I don't know if we can judge that. Like who said that the American way is right?
Mm.
So we very often put kind of this blinders and say that, oh, because the West said this and that's why it's right. And I generally question that.
Mm.
I mean, if America was so right, they would not, like, we wouldn't have situations like Cambridge Analytica. We would not have questions about other countries mingling in the US elections and all the other issues that have been associated with, let's say, social media and its impact on the people. So, would I give another country a chance? Sure. What we should do is educate ourselves on the values that society holds up.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, what are the Chinese values? How do Chinese people govern themselves? And it's a very old. China has a very old history, and it's a country which has done well repeatedly. So there must be things that they're doing right, and I would go there not from a fear perspective, but from a curiosity perspective to learn what governs the people in China. And if you know how they think, then you can predict what the next steps would be,
Mm-hmm.
rather than being like, oh, let's not ask them to be on the table because we are scared. That that will never lead to good outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And one of my last questions, sort of about the possible adverse effects or problematic things with technology, is concerning social media, as academics like Colin Newport and others raise concerns about its effects and mention correlations between depression, anxiety, and the use of social media, especially and most concerningly amongst young people age 12 and up, youngsters. So, what do you think about this? Does this concern you? And are we now all just addicted to social media, basically?
I mean, the answer to your last question, yes, we are, and we're deeply addicted, and that's definitely a concern, and of course there's a lot of literature about how these social media tools are developed and designed. A lot of them are modeled on casinos and slot machines and so forth. What is an infinite scroll? You never feel that there's an end, and that's why you never stop, because it's very effortless. Or the fact that before your next movie, like one movie ends and it gives you literally 5 seconds before the next one starts. You as a human being don't have like the agency to decide if you want to go to the next one or not. The default option is to keep continuing consuming, and that is scary. That is scary because then we end up floating with whatever is given to us without really realizing, we are consumers. We are continuous consumers without realizing what are we producing ourselves. And actually, Cal Newport is a very interesting author, and I've read his other book called Deep Work. And the thesis of that book was very simple. He said that this generation and the next, most people will just float on consumption of social media and let's say what is around us. And the people who will be able to prioritize deep work are the ones who will lead the world. And
I think for people may not know, if you by deep work you mean people who can focus on their tasks properly,
who can cut that clutter out of their minds and focus on one thing for a significant amount of time.
Yeah.
And that's something which it stuck with me, because he's right. I see also my own behavior and consumption patterns, and I see my friends and, let's say, younger people or older people. We see so many people, if nothing else to do, we pull up our phone and start scrolling Instagram. When is the last time we have allowed ourselves to be bored?
Yeah.
Think about it. And why people say that they have their best ideas in showers, because that's the time you're actually not doing anything else.
Yeah.
Why, like, we have our best ideas when we let our mind free and let it think rather than consume it. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's where I always challenge people. Say, okay, next time you go to the toilet, leave your phone out, right? Yeah. And see, maybe you come up with a great idea out of there. Or like, we need to convince ourselves to let ourselves be bored. That's one thing.
Yeah.
And that and recognizing kind of that that not only consume but think of what are you producing as an individual in terms of content but ideas and so forth. So that is actually on the side of consumption. But the second thing which I wanted to mention was on choice. We live in this world where we have ample choice and choice with every single thing, starting from for evening, if you want to order food, you have like, before you had maybe, if you're lucky, your mom cooking some food for you, or your dad, or yourself, and now you have like, oh well, there's Uber Eats, and then you can't, for 30 minutes you can't decide what you want to eat. Same goes with Netflix. I mean, I sometimes spend more time choosing the movie than the movie itself. And that goes down to kind of which university you're going to start study at. Or also like due to dating apps. I think of Tinder and so forth. We are never satisfied with the choice we make because you always think the next one could be better.
Yeah.
And that is extremely scary because that is what is leading to anxiety and other mental issues. And that is something which we have to, as society, figure out how to deal with it. There's ample amount of choice. We didn't, our grandparents hadn't had that in their lives. We just have too much choice. That's why we're never satisfied with the choice we make.
So kind of this constant FOMO, fear of missing out.
Always, always. I mean, look at Instagram. We continuously, consciously or subconsciously measuring up. It almost feels like a race, which never stops against all the people that we know. And then the number of players just keeps rising because you meet people all the time.
Yeah.
And then you just look back and look forward. It's like, shit, this person is there and I'm here, and back and forth, rather than focusing in our own, let's say, direction and ambitions.
Yeah. So we're kind of clouded by all this spam, all this digital spam.
Digital spam, absolutely. I mean, yeah, that's what it is.
And so my last question is a bit more personal, and it's about yourself. So I was wondering what role you want to play in this world, in this unfolding world we talk about, tech world, digital world. Which role you, Raj, want to play in it?
Right. I think we learn, we pivot, we do different things. But I've done a lot of different things in my so far life. But I of course aim to do way more, given I'm only 24 right now. What my personal mission is to empower others, and anything that aligns with that is generally what I will spend time and effort on with. That can be anything from, let's say, sitting down with a kid and understanding kind of what their ambitions are and trying to help to think bigger, to starting educational organizations like the Erasmus Tech Community, working with the Erasmus Center for Data Analytics on facilitating more, let's say, applied education, to running a podcast where, again, the idea is to gather interesting ideas and questions from the speakers and share with people so that they can develop further. I personally see myself going to more and more into the startup space, because I do believe that entrepreneurship is the way to solve global problems. And it is something which is still always chosen as a plan B, and it needs to be given more focus and attention. So going to startup coaching, working with, let's say, early stage entrepreneurs, I get a lot of energy and fulfillment from meeting new people who want to have an impact and want to do something in life. So I see myself focusing my time more to spend with early stage technology driven, let's say, entrepreneurs, and there, be it through helping them with scoping ideas or developing the market, connecting the dots between, let's say, between one country and the other, because, well, due to my global network and my own global mindset, those are the things that I aim to do further. So I'm working on a few projects here and there right now. Still cannot fully announce them, but yeah, I'm excited.
Sounds great, man. Well, thank you very much for being here. Thank you guys for watching. If you have managed to to get this far, and have a nice day.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.